March Madness is here, and Tennessee men's basketball knows where they're going to start, who they're going to start with, possible opponents, future locations, and all of the above. I'm Ryan Sylvia with VolReport.com on the Rivals Network. And Tennessee got to the 2 line. It was questions on if they would bump up into the 1 spot after losing to Mississippi State to start off the SEC tournament. Looked like that 2 seed was kind of solidified, and that's what it ends up being. They're going to go to Charlotte to get things started. That's where your first and second round games are going to be played. Your opponent to get the tournament started, St. Peter's. If that sounds familiar, it's because that's the team that's already been a Cinderella in March Madness. They knocked off Kentucky a couple years ago. You got a different head coach. You have different players. It's a completely different team, but it's still the St. Peter's program that took down Kentucky and made its own run a couple years back. Tennessee shouldn't have to worry too much about that game. Obviously, any March Madness situation, you have to show up or else you will get upset. We've seen it time and time again, whether it's a 16 beating a 1, a 15 beating a 2. You can't sleepwalk into the game, but Tennessee still should feel pretty good heading into that. If you show up, you play your own game, you do your thing, Tennessee will be fine, and they should head to a round of 32 matchup. Waiting for them there, 3 different possibilities. 7 seed Texas, that is a little bit dicey, possibly. Texas finished this season strong. They were up and down a little bit. A team Tennessee played just last season in the regular season. They've got scores like a Max Asmus. They've got a couple transfer forwards that look pretty solid too, that are starting to come around. It's a team that's dangerous. It's a team Tennessee definitely cannot sleepwalk into. But that's if Texas is the opponent, because you got a play-in game for that 10th spot. UVA and Colorado State, the other 2 teams that will be in that play-in, playing Texas in the first round for a chance to play either Tennessee or St. Peter's. You feel pretty good about either of those teams. I think UVA is a team that is just absolutely limping into the March Madness field. It's an abysmal offense, a really solid defense, but a team that can't hit free throws. And you got to hit your free throws if you want to win in March. Virginia, if they can get past Colorado State and then they can get past Texas, Tennessee should feel pretty good going into that. And Colorado State kind of on the same note. Not a bad team by any means, but not a team that Tennessee should necessarily fear. Texas, possibly a little worrisome, but obviously Tennessee, the 2 seed, they're going to be favorites. They should take care of business and get to a second straight Sweet 16, but it's not going to be easy if it is the Longhorns over in Charlotte. If they make it to that second straight Sweet 16, they're headed to Detroit, and they will have a date with either, of course, could be some Cinderellas, but if we avoid a Cinderella run, either 3 seed Creighton, 6 seed South Carolina, or 11 seed Oregon. We'll start with South Carolina just because they're in the SEC. Tennessee 1-1 against them this year, dropped the game at home, went to Columbia and clinched the SEC out there. I think if it came to a third meeting with South Carolina, Tennessee should have the advantage. It's a more talented roster. South Carolina, still a young team. Didn't make the field last year under Lamont Paris, who turned things around this year. But kind of as a first March Madness run, if they're able to get to the Sweet 16, that would be a really good stretch for them. Tennessee, I think, should feel good if it is a rematch there for the 3rd time this season. Moving to 11 seed Oregon, similar situation where that's not a team that's super threatening. We'll see what happens if that is the case. But once again, if you can avoid 3 seed Creighton, you should feel pretty good. Looking at Creighton, that's a deep team. They got 3 guys who can score 17 plus points per game. That's what they're averaging on the year. We know Tennessee's weakness at this point, at least what it kind of looks like after the loss to MSU, is physicality in the post. Well, Creighton does have a 7-1 center who is one of those guys averaging 17 plus points a game, and Ryan Kalkbrenner. If you can handle him and then you can get back to that perimeter defense, I honestly don't hate that draw compared to some of the other 3 seeds that are out there. I think there's worse situations that you could be in than playing Creighton for a spot in your second ever Elite 8. You got to get there. Creighton's got to get there. A bunch of stuff could happen. But if you're looking at this point through the Sweet 16, I think Tennessee's overall got to like what they're doing here or what their draw ended up being for March Madness. We'll have to see. It's March Madness. Things go crazy. But on paper, not the worst thing in the world, in my opinion. Other top seeds that you could see in the Elite 8 on the way to possibly your first Final Four ever. Top seed Purdue. Tennessee's already played them over in Hawaii. Didn't go their way. Zach Edey is a monster. He's tough to stop. He's getting whistles. It's a tough thing to deal with when you have who's likely going to win back-to-back Player of the Years throughout the entire country. And you struggle sometimes to guard in the post. that could be an issue. Tennessee couldn't get it done the first time. With it being a rematch, maybe you can look at the tape, maybe things can change, but that's going to be a game that Tennessee would have his hands full for. But at the same time, who knows if Purdue's going to be that team that's all the way there. We've seen them get knocked off early in previous tournaments, just lost to a 16 seed last year. So Purdue going to be the favorite to get there, but we'll have to see if that's who Tennessee would face, if Tennessee can even get that far. Another rematch, though, if it is the 4 seed in Kansas. Tennessee also played them out in Hawaii. Hunter Dickinson's a great player. Tennessee also couldn't do enough to get past that game. They got good efforts from a couple guys. I believe Santiago Vespi had a really good game against Kansas. They showed they can do it. They showed that's a winnable game, but it's still going to be a tough matchup with what they have in the post and what their kind of ceiling is. They haven't lived up to the hype this year necessarily. But when Tennessee was playing them, they were considered one of the top teams in the country. Now you're sitting around the 12 to 16 line if you're looking at what is their seeding. So they didn't finish the best, but it's still a team Tennessee's definitely going to have to respect. The 5 seed Gonzaga, not the Gonzaga we're used to. Mark Few is always going to have his teams ready to go, but probably not the biggest worry in the world. I think if you end up getting Gonzaga, if you make it to the Elite Eight, you feel a lot better about that than playing Purdue and then playing Kansas. So Tennessee, once again, 2 seed in the Midwest, starting things off in Charlotte, gonna then head over to Detroit if they're able to get to back-to-back Sweet 16s. That's my instant reaction. That's my takeaway. Overall, I think you gotta like it if you're Tennessee. Things could have shaken out in a much worse way. You still have to show up, you still have to win your games, but on paper, Tennessee could very possibly be heading back to their second ever Elite Eight. If you want to join the ride, if you want to follow along the way, make sure you head over to VolReport.com for all of our written content, video content, everything in between over on the site. I'm standing right outside Food City Center. We're about to talk to Rick Barnes and a couple players, get their instant reactions from this tournament draw and see what their kind of attitude is coming off a 2-game losing streak heading into March Madness. Tennessee baseball wrapped up their series opener or SEC opener against Alabama today, dropped the series 2-1. They're going to try to bounce back. We'll have coverage on that. Softball's off to a really strong start. We have weekly recaps on what the softball team is doing, and it is never not football time in Tennessee. Spring ball starts on Monday. So if you want coverage inside the facility on football, finding out what this team thinks about heading onto this March Madness run, even what the Lady Vols are thinking as well, head over to VolReport.com. Links to everything is in the description. Thank you for watching.